So, hi everybody. I'm Hallie, obviously, and since some of you are new, I thought I would just give a real short introduction of who I am and what this is all about. You probably have seen in the meetup, in the community, what it's all about. But I am an EdTech marketer. I've been in EdTech for 25 years. I used to be on the services side. In the middle, I was a speech pathologist for San Diego Unified. So I took a little bit of a different route. I started in ed tech, went to education, got sucked back to ed tech. So the last 13 years or so, I've been leading marketing teams. And last year, I decided to branch out on my own. And I have always appreciated the uh, ability to collaborate with other ed techers. And that's why I started this, so that I didn't have to try to answer all questions on my own. And I think it can be a little bit isolating sometimes. So in this call, there's sort of that feeling when you get off of like, okay, well, I'm not the only one that thinks this, this market is hard or this activity is hard or whatever it is. So that's the spirit of the call, is to collaborate and solve problems together. And so today I am happy to introduce Dan and Sam, and they run a SDR, BDR outbound calling service for ed tech companies. I'm going to let them kind of give the background. We're not going to break into breakout rooms, which people have come in the past. That's what we usually do. But for this one, I wanted all of us to stay together and just to have kind of an interactive discussion. So Sam and Dan are going to lead that. And you can always put questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. We'll see how it goes. We've never really had a group quite this big. So Sam and Dana, we'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. I think I'm going to go first here, and I got a couple things that I'd like to do even before we start. Number one is we really like things to be collaborative, though we run an organization I'll tell you about, like Hallie said. We also do trainings like this or conversations like this very regularly, and we have a way we like them to go, which is that you guys don't just listen to us talk the entire time, that we leverage the brain trust that's on the call, and that we just help facilitate a robust conversation, adding our insights and spice where we can. That said, it's really helpful if the chat works and if everyone knows where the chat is and if everybody participates in the chat. So the first thing I'd like to do is just see if everybody can put where in the world, maybe your city or wherever you are from, in the chat. And we'll kind of get an idea of where everybody's at, and also just get people finding the chat and using the chat. So that will be helpful. Look at this, already all over the place. I haven't seen two of the same. Oh, a couple Arizonas.
I guess with New York City.
Yeah, great. So people from all over the place. Another one from Arizona. Lots in Arizona so far. Awesome. Well, while we're doing that and everybody's now checking out where everybody's from, I'll give you a quick background. So Dan and I own and run Engaged Prospect. Hallie is correct that one of our service offerings, and perhaps the core service offering, is leading an outbound sales team that works on behalf of our clients to do outbound top of funnel appointment setting and lead generation. However, it's not the only thing we do. We work with internal teams as sort of embedded consulting to help make a playbook or fix systems or modernize technology, train reps, these sorts of things. And then we also do sort of standard sales trainings that you might have been through in the past. But we are also forward thinking. So we didn't used to do AI for sales trainings, and now we do, right? So continuing to update that, whereas some people who are doing maybe a specific methodology, that can sometimes kind of get stale. And so a lot of that. However, we are not just sales guys. We are ed tech and education steeped and passionate about that. So I'm a former classroom teacher, both in K-12 and in higher ed. I worked in curriculum development, both in traditional schools as well as in online and virtual communities and organizations. And then in our ed tech sort of professional sales career, Dan and I both worked at a company called Carnegie Learning a dozen or more years ago, which is a big Pittsburgh curriculum organization and publisher. And since starting Engaged Prospect, we've worked with countless EdTech entrepreneurs and sales teams. That said, just so you know, though it's a niche of ours, it's not exclusive. We work with many other types of companies that do B2B sales and need something tightened up in their sales effort. We've been running and helping organizations through Engaged Prospect for 10 years this August. So a milestone we're very excited about. In a couple of weeks, we hit our 10-year mark, which is wonderful and a nice milestone to hit. So my background, I gave you a little bit there. Dan, if you'd like to just give a minute or two or 30 seconds of your background as well, anything I might have missed?
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. Hi, everybody, and thank you for having us today, first and foremost. Yeah, Sam mentioned sort of the main part of my background. I was director of sales at Carnegie Learning. The reason why this business started in the first place was Common Core came out. We were very well positioned for those standards, and Carnegie Learning doubled in size in maybe like a 4-month period. We went from 20 million to about $40 million in revenue. And because of that, that's obviously a good thing to happen, but it causes challenges. So today when we're talking, I know we have small groups, there might be larger groups. There's sales challenges regardless of your size. And what we learned at Carnegie Learning when we grew was that prospecting was going to be put significantly on hold until the new clients were on board and had their software turned on and all of the things. We built this company, which you'll get into more shortly, but we built it to focus on keeping a constant pipeline and a constant effort to find new business, and why we believe that was super important. Obviously, we'll talk quite a bit about that today, but that was my background. Sales manager, trainer for a long time in the EdTech space. And we wanted to sort of take what we were doing, pretty cool stuff with Carnegie Learning, and have the opportunity to have our own business, but also to help others that needed kind of the things we knew.
Excellent. So just as a point of clarity to make sure we're all on the same page, today's topic is on cold outbound, specifically on the sales side, not really on the digital marketing side. And, Hallie put a good post about what we'll cover, but I'm not sure that that's 100% accurate, because we're hopefully going to cover whatever you guys want to talk about and, figure that out. So I think one good place to start, again, just to kind of get an idea of who's on the call. If we can go to the chat and do just a Y or an N or a yes or a no. How many of you are at an organization that is currently doing some cold outbound as part of your overall sales motion? Oh, great. Lots of yeses. And for anybody who put no so far, maybe you can clarify yes or no. Have you, in a previous life or previous organization, done cold outbound or had that as part of your sales channels or efforts? Anybody who's got 2 no's there, right? Like not now and not before. Mm-hmm. Clearly, this will be pretty new for you all. Awesome. Okay. So it looks like most people are coming in with some background and currently some things that are working, not working, but sorry, that you've done in the past. I think where we want to get to with today's call is like what has worked in the past, what's still working, what maybe worked in the past and is not working, and sort of things that we might need to change. But I think before we do that, we should kind of clarify and get on the same page about what cold outbound is, who does that, what their sort of day-to-day looks like. And so I have an open-ended question. And again, I'd like us, again, to go to the chat if at all possible. For those of you that put yes to either of those questions, that cold outbound is a part of your sales motion, can you kind of like list like 4 or 5 of the top activities that whoever was doing your outbound, whether it was a sales rep or whether it was you as an entrepreneur or whoever's doing that, what are kind of like the 4 or 5 things that you think made up their day, the key activities that people that are doing cold outbound do. And clearly, obviously, cold calling is one thing, but there's more to the role, right? What are the things that they might be doing as key activities to be successful in the role? And Dan, I know you're watching the chat. Maybe you can pick a few things that we might want to explore here. I see some people talking about getting stuff into the CRM, some research,
Yeah.
obviously cold calls.
Seems like the theme is research, CRM, logging and data tracking kind of things, calls, emails. Yep. Seems like it's
Message
all.
testing, interesting.
Yep. LinkedIn. Yeah, this is great. Research, calling leads, cold emailing, tracking metrics, logging it all in the CRM. Yes. Anybody have any activities that they've seen their outbound salespeople take on that maybe are a little different than these? I'll give you an example. At Carnegie Learning, inside sales reps were also responsible to work with their field correspondents. So those who lived in the markets they were calling into, field reps. The inside team was joined, so they would share in responsibilities of all of the things on this list. In addition, things like sending quotes and working with setting up teachers in classes for the curriculum, things like that. Any other tangential tasks? Attending conferences is great.
Oh, event invitations. I love that one. We'll talk about that a little bit. Participating and listening in on the calls they're booking, right? To continue with their product knowledge and to hear from those folks.
Mhm.
Brittany's got full cycle sales folks inside doing demos as well as renewals. So as people are putting these notes in, I think it's important to kind of think again to the central theme here, like what works and maybe what are some potential challenges or some things that might make an effort like this unsuccessful, not talking to enough people, not talking to the right people, and so on. We can obviously talk about the central tenets. All of you guys know this: right person, right message, right time, right? That's the thing. If you're talking to the right people with the right message at the right time, they're going to be interested in learning more. That's easy. But how do you get to the right people? Maybe it's researching leads. Maybe it's buying data. How do you get to the right message? Maybe it's incredible product market fit and you've got all the marketing materials. Maybe it's testing messaging. There's a lot of things. How do you get to the right time? There's some people who might think that cold outbound never works because it's never the right time. Summer break, nobody's there. Christmas break, nobody's there. Spring testing, nobody wants to talk. Back to school, everybody's got what they already need, right? Like, well, there is no right time. And it might be some people's thoughts. So we can talk about those central tenets, but when you really start to scratch the surface, these are the things that people are doing to get to the right people or to have the right message or to be present and in front of people at the right time. So now we're really getting into like the actual nitty gritty of like, what are these people doing day to day? Or what are we doing? What am I doing day to day, right? When you look at all of this, there are right ways to do some of these things and wrong ways to do some of these things. For instance, the person who's got their team doing full cycle sales, if they're booked all day with demos, then they're never going to do prospecting. That's a good problem to have, right? All day with demos, but now who's doing the prospecting, right? So like, at that point in time, do you grow the team? And if you grow the team, is it just white space or do they come in sort of entry level and do a component? For people who are doing research, have you ever found somebody who's doing way too much research and research that's not actually going to help anything except keep them from reaching out to somebody and being genuinely curious. Like, you don't really know what you're seeing by doing your research, if it's accurate or not. You need to have a conversation and ask good questions and run discovery and stuff. So I guess there's a lot of things on here, but I'd like to, Hallie, is everyone able to come off mute? Is that,
Yeah.
are they, does anybody want to like speak up and talk about like either maybe something they've seen go awry with people having too much to do, or maybe something going sideways with someone being focused on only one thing and actually they need to be doing more stuff? I'm trying to keep it open-ended, but we're talking about the key activities that drive success. And each of these can open up success, but also maybe potential difficulties. And I think Dan and I are ultimately going to talk about how we see like structuring some of the day-to-day, but I'd like to just open it up to what people have seen successful or why they're structuring it the ways they have. Again, I know it's an open-ended question, but maybe talk to key activities that you've seen be successful or not successful.
Speak up. Oh, do you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you. Can hear
All
both
right.
of you.
I've put my video on. My name is Chris Kelly. I have worked in the EdTech space for 29 years. It's mostly been, I've done higher ed, I've done K-12, and a lot of it's been services to companies. So I think one of the things that has to be discussed is it's very different to be selling for Carnegie Learning versus an early stage startup. So when you look at, the bigger companies like a Savvis or a Houghton Mifflin, they have a brand name established. They can afford to have SDRs setting up appointments. And if you go into a smaller company, you're not going to have that name recognition. And typically, that person is going to be a full cycle sales rep.
In the small business, Chris? In the
Yes, in
startup?
a small business.
Yeah. Yeah. Why is that, do you think? I agree with you.
I think it's two things. One, the smaller company typically doesn't have the ability to hire resources to do it. And then secondly, I think, the other part of it is that, when you look at the training that is given to SDRs and the training that is given around prospecting, in most of ed tech, it's non-existent. It's, smile and dial, pick up the phone, send as many emails as you want. It's not around quality. It's not around research. And this disengages customers really fast and it drops the morale of the team.
My main comment back to you is in full agreement. Number one. Number two, I think that lends itself to the reason why this topic in ed tech, especially for smaller companies, is so important. Because I'm hearing a couple of things, at my words, not yours, but like the generalization of the salesperson in an ed tech startup is often too broad, too general. You might hire a former teacher and be like, now you're a salesperson, here's what to do. And they struggle with some of the sales components. Or you hire a salesperson right out of school and say, here's your industry, go figure it out. And they struggle with the funding cycles and knowledge of what goes on in a school. That's a huge challenge that I've seen a lot. And there's a huge challenge in general just by having a one-size-fits-all salesperson too.
I agree with you 100%. I agree with you. I mean, if you look at sales, it's a combination of various different skills. I mean, the only thing I would add is if you look at the small company, typically, they bring in a first hire salesperson and they don't have the resources to have that person be specialized. And that creates a lot of challenges, especially if they're bringing in a senior person who has not prospected in several years and is not aware of what I call, prospecting 2.0 in terms of getting in front of customers.
Can I play devil's advocate a little bit, sort of starting with the assumption, this is Lydia Morris speaking, and I was going to say, starting with the assumption that they're probably not really absolute right or wrong answers here in any case, but I most recently tested SDRs with K-12 fuel sales, which I thought was a great company. They're very EdTech focused. Ultimately, the pilot didn't work based on economics. And, maybe that plays into SDRs not working for small companies, but they were very clear about the fact that the SDRs, their job was to probe for needs and not to go deep into product selling, and not really, which our sales reps liked, because they didn't want to be handing over the sales process to the SDRs. But if the SDR can be somewhat knowledgeable, but not so deeply knowledgeable, but really probe on needs and try to set up that initial meeting, that's the win. And I think there's some logic to that, depending on how you scope the assignment.
Lydia, I have a
Lydia,
question for you, not to put you on the hot seat or anything, but unpack one of the things you just mentioned. It sounds to me, I'm going to be way more direct, that it has nothing to do with you. Please don't take offense.
No,
It sounds
we're
to me
just
like-
we're just all trying to figure this out together, right?
Sounds to me like maybe you just said SDRs don't need to know as much, and I'm adding this to it, but is there a theme that maybe they're the more junior salesperson in the process? I don't know if you could see my hands.
I mean, I've tested this twice with 2 different companies and 2 different support agencies, and yes, I would say absolutely that the SDR was the first point of contact, sort of top of the funnel.
The reason I ask, and we're by no means, Sam and I are not these kinds of people. We're not going to sell what we do today, but from a frame of reference standpoint, I want to chime in. I agree with you, and I think the world believes that it's the typical job career path for a salesperson, not always, but is start on a telephone sales job. Usually that's an SDR kind of thing, or possibly the newspaper or whatever else, right? Then you move into account executive roles. You get promoted into this, I get to do demos now and have my own clients and build relationships. This is awesome. And then some level of management or training or whatever their career takes them to. That was what I did. Our business has noticed what you just said, our engaged prospect, and we flipped that upside down and saw probably between a 60 and 70% increase in results. Our SDRs, now this is unfair for you guys, because if you have a team of SDRs and account executives, budgets you can't change the economy. But we did with ours, because that's our product. Our product is our SDRs. Several of them are making significantly more money than account executives at most companies. And I think what that has taught us is 2 things. One, as a business that provides this kind of work, we have to be good at it, number 1. But we also compensate them, because turnover is a very difficult thing in a business, all of our companies, but in our kind of company, we feel a big hit, right? So we want to keep them if they're performing.
Nope, Dan froze. Dan, I can take over. So Dan's talking about, like, the idea of, is this an entry-level job that I'm just going to do because I need to, but I want to get out of making 200 dials a day as quickly as possible? Or are you hiring people who are competent, who are professional, who are good communicators, which you might be, but who also, like, strangely enough, whether it's, self-inflicted harm or whatever, like this role, like, gamify it, get really, like, interested in I'm not trying to move on. There's a craft here. There's a professional craft here of getting the right data and knowing the value proposition and providing feedback from the phones to my product team and to my leadership team that is valuable. And if I get promoted, I don't want to get promoted to maybe something else that's completely different. I want to run a team of SDRs myself. Like, this is something that gets me excited. Dan and I joke about this, but like, I told Hallie, I go, I can wax poetic for 2 hours just on patience in the sales cycle, right? Like one specific thing. When Dan and I are done with this call, you guys are all going to go do whatever you're going to do. Dan and I are going to continue talking about Outbound. We're going to go look at some data, or we're going to go review a call tape, or we're going to like, this is what we love. And so when Dan said like, that's our product, it has to be good, forget about us and our product and whatnot. If you're launching an internal team or whatever, we think that the people and the investment in the people and the training and like having folks who don't want to do this for 6 months and move on, but who like actually like see this potentially as their career or see real money attached to this. I'll give you an example. I know a guy who makes a lot of money who's never led a sales team ever. And I remember asking him, I'm like, don't you, I'm like, what, you've been a territory rep for 30 years. Like, that's all you're ever going to be? And he's like, yeah, I have no desire to lead a team. That's a completely different job. I'm really good at going out and like this thing I've been doing since I was 25. I just keep getting more business and closing bigger deals and making more money and holding a bigger quota. But that's all I've ever wanted to do. And I've never wanted to deal with call offs and deal with HR and deal with this and deal with that, right? It can be the same in what many people think of as an entry-level stepping stone job. It doesn't have to be. This is a craft. It's a trade. It's a profession. And, you know, I could go down like sort of our business offering, and I don't want to, but like when we hire people, that's what they're joining a company. That's what we do. That's the mission, right? So like they know the role. And additionally, they have the supports that Chris was talking about that many of the smaller companies don't have, right? So access to good data and access to training and access to, when I say good data, I mean like that research you're talking about. And it's not just knowing a little bit about your school district you're going after or the person you're going after, but it's like, it's so granular. It's direct dials. It's having access to direct dials. It's having like, which tees you up to maybe actually have a conversation with someone. And if you're prepared, then you can, you know, interest them and you can ask them a couple of good leading questions and you can drop off a brochure and circle back when it's the right time. Like literally that sort of granular level. To be successful at this, we've seen that there has to be like a focus and a respect for the role and the supports necessary to be successful, or it fails to start, or there's turnover, or the ROI is not there. The economics, Lydia, as you mentioned, aren't there, right? And so that's just some of the things that we've seen. We had a couple of other people mention, though, that their folks are doing it sort of full cycle, even including renewals. And I'd love to hear kind of how that's working and sort of what how you've set them up for success, because that's a bit different than what we're talking about. And certainly if it's working for you, that's great. So would anybody who talked about sort of full cycle sales want to jump in? Or Hallie, I see you.
Yeah, I wanted to say something to Chris, Kelly, which is that I think being at a startup is precisely why Sam and Dan are in the business that they're in, right? You don't have the resources or the time to hire and perfect this process internally. That's why you go to Engage Prospect. That's why I go to Engage Prospect, because they have perfected the process. And I think something that I learned that I had never thought about, even though I had managed an SDR team, that Sam and Dan do a little differently, that I found revealing and helpful, if I ever had to do this again on the SDR side myself, was the separation of duties. So like there are leveled reps in the Engage Prospect team, and sort of like the one person is verifying that they even have the right number, or they start off the calls with like their most compelling rep to try to test out the gate. There's like this, we're talking about SDR and BDR calling as like this monolith, but to Sam's point, you can like break it down into these granular parts. And I think Sam and Dan, that's something that I think people would find valuable if you want to share kind of how you guys approach a new area or a new client.
I I had you up until the new area, new client. Are you talking separation of duties kinds of stuff?
Well, I just remembered when I started working with you, you said, here's how we're going to start out. We're going to have the first 50 calls are going to be made by our top rep, and he's going to validate whether this messaging works. Simultaneously, the more entry level rep is going to be calling for to verify accuracy of the phone number and actual pickup, stuff like that.
Yep, awesome. Yeah, so let me take a step back. I wrote my master's thesis on the concept of splitting prospecting efforts from account management, ultimately. And this was 20 years ago, so things have changed. Many organizations now split SDRs from account executives. Not a big deal, but at the time, that was not common. And did a big study, and frankly, it got me to graduate. So that was part of why I did it. The other part was I've been intrigued by this my whole life. Just like you would separate marketing from sales, or account management from field sales, from SDRs, from client, client care after they become a client. A lot of businesses kind of silo that. We've taken it a tiny bit further, and we're siloing the very first phone calls, as Hallie just mentioned. With a new client, we have the leader of our team make the first calls to help inform the scripting that we write for that client, right, for the partner. Gets the various nuances out of the call session. Hey, if you're talking to the gatekeeper of a curriculum director, this is what to say, versus when you talk to director of IT, et cetera, et cetera. Then we have a pre-sales team that is focused on one data point only. That data point is the biggest pain in every salesperson's rear ends, which is literally call to conversation ratio. Anyone that has ever made cold calls, I assume a lot of us on this call have, even if it was 20 for a brand new business or whatever, but everyone who has ever cold called, there's two problems with it. One, it's scary because people are sometimes mean or don't want to talk to you or whatever. Fine, that we deal with that. But the other part is I make all of these phone calls and don't speak to anybody. And that's a huge problem. It causes burnout. It causes wasted money being invested into certain programs. Let me give you an example, if you don't mind, real quick. This calendar year so far, our call to conversation ratio as a company, and this is based on 302,000 phone calls since January 1st.
Dan, before you reveal it, let's define call to conversation. If we're calling, we had a client that sold software to literally music schools, as well as like guitar shops that have music in the background, or music teachers in the back of their retail shop. We would talk to somebody 100% of the time. Somebody would pick up the phone and say, Jim's music shop. That's not a conversation. A conversation is getting to the decision maker we were trying to get to. Now, they might tell us, actually, I'm not the decision maker, right? You need to talk to Jim. But we didn't know. We were trying to get a hold of the VP of this, or the owner of this, or the director of that. If we speak to that person, that's a call to conversation ratio. Okay.
So whether they're interested or not, the decision maker or not, if I'm looking for Lydia Morris and I have somebody answer saying, hi, this is Lydia, that's a yes, right? I'm 1 for 1. Unfortunately, and you guys probably have seen this as well, it's not 1-to-1. Out of 302,000 phone calls, our call to conversation ratio this calendar year has been 6.68%. So that means we're looking for some of the 70,000 principals in the country, and the curriculum directors, and the IT directors, and directors of HR, and we're talking to 7 people every time we make 100 phone calls. So does that mean cold calling doesn't work? Cold calling is dead. Does that mean education, you can't do that? Does that mean that it's harder? It's harder, yes. Does it work? Yes. It just has to be done smart. So back to Hallie's point on like dividing division of duties, right? Here's the cliff notes of the end of my thesis. If you have somebody focused on this group of activities to find new opportunities, and you have been trained and rewarded and all the things, treat it like it's an entirely new, different department. And then you have account execs or field reps or whatever, totally different, trained differently, educated differently, different responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. That was the cliff notes of what I found during the work in my thesis and what we found in Engaged Prospect for 10 years. The reason why I'm belaboring this point slightly is what that means. It's not just dividing the people's responsibilities. It's figuring out what is the most valuable thing this person can do for my company. If they're an SDR, the answer is talk to people that aren't clients, customers, to get them hopefully interested. That's our SDRs. The number one thing is, are you on the phone talking to human beings that are the right people to try to talk to? Why I'm saying this is a lot of the notes here, and Sam, I'll turn it back to you in a second. I know I'm taking a long time here, but
Okay.
all of these notes, right? Like CRM maintenance, emails, research, knowing your ICP, training, attending conferences, all are the exact right activities. But I know we have 20 minutes left. I want to leave you with always consider, is there a way to automate something that my expensive salesperson is doing so that they can have more conversations? Or is there something I could do for my field rep to be in front of people more often and limit their need to take notes and blah, blah, blah. We'll get into kind of what that stuff is, but you guys know with the technology changes over the decades, with AI coming out and getting better and better every minute, there are things that can be done to equip your people to then do the 1 or 2 or 3 most important things and have success with it, even if they're only talking to 7 or 6 or 5 people out of 100. That still can be successful if structured properly. Sort of all about job design, I think, is the topic I'm talking about.
Yeah. So let me jump in. And I see that there's things in here about AI. There's things in here about technologies we're using with the auto dialers. We'll get to them in a second, but let's kind of zoom out a little bit. I don't want anyone to think that we've spent 40 minutes saying, should you have SDRs that are exclusively making phone calls? Okay. That's not the only thing we're talking about here. The fact is, research is important. Clean data is important. Technology that supports people for success is important. Training so that when they get on the phone and actually have a conversation and they say the right things and they have the right tone and ask the right questions, all of these things are important. But with the amount of volume you have to do, how do you get to this? People think of this thing like quantity versus quality, and it's not. I say this all the time. Hallie's heard me say this. It's both. It's quantity and quality. We still need to make. People have said like the era of smile and dial is over and cold calling is dead. How do we get to Dan's point? How do we get our sales reps talking to as many new people who are the right people as possible? So let's go back to that call to conversation ratio for a second. If we could get from 7% to 9%, or if we could get from actually what we do, which is we're not at 9%, right? We're at 7%. So how do we get there from 5%, right? On one hand, that's a 2% increase. But on the other hand, it's actually a 40% increase. Right? 2 more conversations when you were only having 5, now you're having 7, is 40% more conversations. So that's significant. So we look at like who's pulling the lists, looking at the direct dials, making those initial pre-sales calls and getting my best reps a list of people that they can actually talk to 7 instead of 5 of these people. Yeah, it's only 2 more conversations out of 100, but it's 40% more conversations company-wide year over year, right? So should that be the rep that we have that's highly compensated, that's well-trained, that's got a great attitude and a better tone of voice than I have, my my Achilles heel is this darn tone of mine. It sounds like I'm yelling at you all the time, right? You got these people that know what they're doing. We just got to get them more calls. They shouldn't be scraping websites for direct dials. I don't know if that means investing in a database or hiring my company that provides sort of pre-sales vetted phone numbers, or, again, it's not a sales pitch, but it's like, what works? Well, what works is highly trained, professional, high quality people who can have excellent conversations, delivering initial value and setting them up for success, respecting the role and giving them the supports they need, right? So, man, we have so many great conversations here, but I guess our point here is there's a million things that go into being a successful SDR. And if you try to have your SDR do all of them, they probably won't be successful. That's the ultimate point, right? Some of you might have not seen that. You see, like, give them a laptop and a large on-target earning goal, and then they go into a black hole and come back with sales. That can happen for sure, right? But we've seen, by and large, for repetitive sort of scalable efforts, that it's removing those things that maybe are taking too much time, but still need to be done, and finding a way to give that to them rather than having them build it themselves. I've seen some things here on questions Chris just asked about email. There's a lot of things that can be done: LinkedIn outreach, email outreach, phone outreach, conference attendance, these sorts of things. I will say that we focus very much on emails and calls, and we have a department that works on email copy, works on using some tools for personalization that are not like, hey, I see you went to this college, which bar did you choose on Friday night kind of personalization, but more like what's in your school board notes, or what's in like if you're in a League of Innovative Schools, or like something that's relevant, right, to the messaging. We have a department that works on email copy and inserting personalization where we can through tech-enabled systems, and our SDRs don't actually do that. They leverage it. It goes out in their name, and they see the emails, and we review that with them, and they understand the messaging. But that's another thing that we've sort of separated out from. We want our SDRs making phone calls, not because it's a smile and dial culture, but it's because anything I can do to make them have as many, whether it's 7, 8, 9 per 100 dials, I want them having those conversations, and those conversations exclusively, and they want to have those too, so that they can say, hey, look, I just found out about a new title I didn't even know, like a director of innovation, or when HR all changed to CPO for a little while, right? Like, sometimes they're the first to hear of these changes, and then we go pull from our database a title we didn't even know and give them a hot list, right? And them out there hitting the pavement is the most important thing they can be doing. So yes, we do emails, but again, that's sort of like funneled from marketing, if you will, versus the SDRs doing it themselves. And personalization and research is built into that, but it's not done for our company. It's not done by the SDRs themselves, but they are trained on it, and they can see it. It can even be in a note on a contact record when it comes up. They can reference that information, but it is fed to them, not because they're not capable, but because we find it to be something that we can automate for them for more quantity. It improves their quality and it improves their quantity without having them each do it themselves. Dan, I've been diatribing soapbox, so I haven't been keeping up with the chat. Maybe you can help me get the things that are relevant to these folks.
Yeah. Yep. I wrote 2 very long things. So if anybody has follow-up questions to that, especially the one where I said something is illegal, please, certainly, let's unpack that before you leave.
Let's talk about AI. I think it's such a hot topic. If you could, I tried to scan
certainly
your long comment. Yeah, if you could.
Let's start with that specific topic, if that's okay. So the idea of using AI, there's lots of AI tools, right? Writing, research, personalization, etc. This specifically is AI voiced agents. So an AI person on the phone making phone calls to prospects. That's what the question was, sort of how the question was asked. For inbound, and if they opt in to receiving phone calls from AI agents, totally legit. That happens probably with all of us for our banks, credit cards, etc. You might get a call that it's not a real person. I personally think in a year or two that will be a major game changer, because I think it will be better than human beings. Okay, if trained properly, if set up properly. But caution.
Those are big ifs. Those are big ifs, but yes.
They are big
yes.
ifs.
Yep.
It's going to be hard, right? But, and Sam, maybe you can explain second nature in a second,
Sure.
sort of how we've seen that. But the thing to be aware of is that you can't do cold outreach if they're not opted in, right? Sort of like the email concept. You're allowed to send a curriculum director an email. She or he could simply opt out. That's fine. With phone calls and the laws around auto dialers and AI and various other phone kinds of stuff, I would suggest researching it before you would use AI to make any sort of outbound outreach, if that's okay. With that said, though, let's if there's follow-up questions, let's do it. But we could tell you some key areas we've seen AI be like successful even as of last year that is really driving our stuff.
So a couple of things. One person, I want to separate, and again, you're all very smart, so you've already done this, but just the teacher in me wants to, clarify. Some people are looking, I think, a little bit as AI for education, like selling an AI tool to schools, okay? And some of what we're talking about here is AI-enabled sales outreach. Okay, so the thing about the Department of Education, Linda McMahon's message 2 or 3 days ago, that's specifically about AI usage in schools and AI tools in schools, and less about AI-assisted cold outbound outreach. Okay, what I understand about my clients who sell AI to schools and our discussions around this is a couple of things. One, I'm actually just going to start somewhere strange, so take this as whatever, but many school districts and the leaders you may be reaching out to are not fans of the current administration and the dismantling of the Department of Education. So reaching out with like, hey, the current administration is potentially going to give you grant funding around this might be just, again, I know that that's weird, but a lot of people don't want maybe to align themselves with Linda McMahon's message. And I'm just throwing that out there, especially if you're listening to like some of your decision makers who just had all of their funding cut or all the uncertainty that's everywhere. So there's that. However, inside that article, which I'm pretty well briefed on, there's a few things I think are important. One is this idea of money being available, potential, the opposite of what they did recently with the freezing of $7 billion is this flowing of money for AI tools, right? And it's actually rather smart. Forget where you stand with the administration for a second, whether you like them or you don't like them. AI is a wave that's not going away, right? It's not, I mean, it's happening. So teaching students the right way to use it, incorporating it into schools in the right way. And that's the second point that I think is really important. The words that stuck out to me mostly there are the responsible use of AI, right? So how do we incorporate AI responsibly and intelligently? It's the same as think back to, the internet, right? Don't believe everything you read on the internet. Okay, cool. But I'm still going to do research for my paper on the internet. So teach me how to find credible sources, right? Teach me how to use it properly, because I'm going to use it whether or not you teach me the responsible way to use it. The same thing will happen with AI for both teachers and students, as well as administrative level softwares and whatnot. But that's my take on that letter, is that funding may be available for this, that basically they're saying we got to get behind figuring out how to incorporate this because it's not going away and it shouldn't go away. It's going to be a boon for our economy and for jobs and of the future. And I mean, it's important. And the second thing is then, how do we all get some shared terminology around responsible use of AI and some shared goals around that? That's not, I don't think, today's topic. So sorry to sideline that, but today's topic is AI assisted sales or AI enabled sales. I think that besides what Dan said, that in a couple of years, some of these AI agents, if they're well trained, and I don't know how much you guys know about training AI, but it's the better the prompt, the better the result, right? If they can be trained properly, They can be incredibly intelligent, incredibly professional sales reps, maybe better than someone you could hire, and certainly less expensive, right? An agent will cost whatever the subscription is versus $70,000 or whatever, I'm just making numbers up, right? But that's not there yet. So we still think the ultimate point is do everything we can to get highly professional sales reps having as many conversations as possible. And so AI can help in that way. So AI can help with research. AI can help with call tape reviews. It's called conversation intelligence. But there's a lot of training and intelligence that a manager used to have to listen to all the call tapes and then give back, praise sandwiches and something to work on in the middle. There are lots of tools that can either help in training or list building or personalization or automation. That I think are important to allow your live, real human sales reps to still do the work that they've been doing and should be doing. I can dive deeper into some of that. We use a tool called Second Nature, which is fantastic. But it's the other way around. Instead of training it to be a sales rep, you train it to be your decision maker, curriculum director at a mid-sized school district in these states. And your reps can practice with this AI ICP and get many more reps than they would because, we talked about call to conversation ratio, but somebody said, well, how many of those result in booked meetings? Well, if you only see 6 good pitches out of 100, it's hard to hit it, right? You don't get that many at bats and that many good pitches to swing at. So if I can prep and have a few conversations with an AI, it's not the same every time. Who knows what they say? They really are pulling from a wealth. You've had conversations with ChatGPT where you and I could give it the exact same questions at the same time and look at what it's saying back to us, and it's saying different things, right? It has different answers. This ability to have these dynamic conversations with potential decision makers, we call it warm-ups, literally like someone at a batting circle with a bat that's heavy and they're practicing before they get up to swing the bat in baseball. They're practicing right before they get up because they got to warm up. We have our reps do 3 or 4 fake calls. It takes 10 to 15 minutes with these AI reps before they get on the phone. And they've told us, man, I've been doing this for years and I'm good on the phones, but I got my word salad out. I got my fumbling out a little bit, right? And then they only had 5 good conversations in the 100 dials they made, but 1 or 2 of those resulted in further next steps when maybe 0 or 1 would have if they dropped the ball on the first one or if they just hadn't kind of warmed up. That was not scalable for us when it was a sales trainer being like, hey, let's role play, right? But now it's an AI agent role playing, and it doesn't affect your brand and it's not out there against the public, but it's helping our reps. So my point here is there's a lot of tools that can do the things that we've been talking about, which is giving your reps the supports they need to be successful, whether it's good data or good warm-ups or personalized emails or other things. And AI certainly plays a role in, I would say, all of those. Every one of those arenas, we've already embedded sales AI, and it's relatively, it's a relatively new field. We've been doing this for 20 years, 10 at Engaged Prospect, and it's only been the last year that we've started incorporating AI into all this. Again, Dan, I'm not watching the chat, and I know we've only got 4 minutes left. We could talk to you guys, with you guys for 10 hours about this stuff, so trying to figure out how to make the most use of it. Dan, can I throw that to you?
Yes. Let's dive into another question or two. I've been answering some as we've been going. Excellent. Let's see. We can do this one easy. Lydia, can you? Is that what Sam was just talking about with the training?
Sam just mentioned the name of a tool, and then I was listening to what he was saying and forgot the name.
Second Nature.
Thank you very much.
You got it. Secondnature.ai.
We don't have a code with them, so that should tell you something. That's good, right? We actually use it and actually like them, regardless of kickbacks or anything.
That's right. That's right.
By the way, it's more than just what we talked about with role playing. It's also like an LMS. So you can, if you do it, you can embed ICP stuff. You can embed questions to like help ramp new reps as you go.
I'm going to put, Sam, the key buckets as we wrap up here. I'm going to put in the chat just so everybody can have it if the transcript gets sent. The 5 big buckets that we focus on for Outbound, and just in general, so that you guys could either thought-provoking or Google a certain bucket that maybe you're unsure of. But I'm going to put those if you want to keep rolling, Sam, for a sec, or turn it back
So
to
is
him.
this strategy process?
Yeah.
Yep. So I'll do it real quickly. This is something that I talk to people for a very long time about, but we look at it through 5 buckets. First is your strategy. Should Outbound be part of your strategy, right? I mean, if you want to talk to Congress people, it's not. You need to hire a lobbyist who stands in the halls of Congress and tracks them down as they walk to the elevator, right? So what is your overall sales strategy? Is Outbound one spoke of the wheel? Is digital marketing feeding leads? Like, there's your strategy. Once you've identified your strategy, then it even gets further, like more strategy. Is it all states? Is it specific states? Is it specific titles? What's your ICP? Like, really defining your strategy. That then goes into a process. Process is extremely important. Okay, I've got my strategy. How do I execute it? How many dials am I making? I'm not going to dive into process too much, but there is a sales process. And we're not even talking about post booking the meeting. This is just cold outbound. However you get your meetings, whether it's cold outbound or inbound or conferences or referrals, then there's a whole process to winning deals, of course, right? But we're just talking about the process from they've never heard of you to they've booked a demo with you, right? Huge process in there. The third thing is tech. Much of that process will be tech enabled, and putting together the right tech stack and having them trained on that tech stack and automating things that they shouldn't be doing in that tech stack and reminding them not to pull reports that they don't need to be looking at and just making dials, the whole thing, right? But tech enabled is really important. The fourth thing is from that tech, you're getting lots of data. And that's really important to look at what's working, what's not, to make incremental improvements, to look at it year over year, month over month, month over year, right? Like April to May isn't as important necessarily as April of last year to April of this year, that kind of stuff, right? So then data. And the fifth is the thing we've been talking about this whole time, which is the people. Ultimately, it's a rep that needs to know what the strategy is, work the process with fidelity, continue to learn the product better, continue to provide feedback from the field, continue to be trained and to hone their craft and so on. And so, that if you can sort of set up your effort thinking through those buckets, and by the way, they're not linear. The data informs the strategy and tech comes and goes and so on. But like, it does kind of flow. Like, let's identify a strategy, make a process to do it, enable it with technology, and then look at what the data is telling us about how that's going. And of course, somebody is executing that plan. If you think through those buckets, I think you can find a lot of things to talk about and fix and identify as areas for improvement and supports and whatnot. So I wasn't prepared to talk about that, but hopefully that was clear. We're at time, and yeah, I'm really glad we got a lot of conversation through the chat. But I wish we could have more time with you all. I'm sure there's questions people have or insights you guys could have shared. It was a little bit more lecture than I typically hope for, but I hope some of this was valuable. Hallie, can I throw the ball back to you?
Yes. So yeah, we're a little bit over, obviously, but this is being recorded. It will be packaged up, posted on YouTube. I will share information about Engage Prospect in a follow-up email if you want to get in contact with Sam and Dan. And until next month, thank you everybody for coming. Thanks Sam and Dan for your expertise, and I hope everybody has a good weekend.